Hi everybody, Jerome here, and today I want to talk about the changes that we're making to the rules of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game starting in the 2017-2018 dueling season. And that's going to start on July 21st, when the new Starter Deck Link Strike, is released. Now, we make changes to the rules and how certain cards work basically every year. Normally, most duelists won't even notice it. But every 3 years or so, when a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series starts, that gives us a chance to do a few bigger overhauls and introduce new gameplay mechanics and new levels of strategy to the game. So that's where we are right now. The newest Yu-Gi-Oh! Series is Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains, and it introduces a new type of monster called Link Monsters. Going on with that, we've also made some changes to the game mat that you can see here. So, first thing to note is what's not there anymore. Where there used to be two big pendulum zones right here, they are now no longer there. As you can see, they've moved. They are now sharing a space with the leftmost and rightmost spell and trap card zones. So the way this works is that you can use these like your spell and trap zones normally. Set traps there, do whatever, it's fine. But when you want to activate a pendulum monster card as a spell card, you activate it in either your left hand or right hand spell and trap card zone. And when you do that, that zone becomes a pendulum zone, in addition to still being a spell and trap zone. So that means that while you've got a pendulum monster card active here as a spell card, cards that work on things in spell and trap zones and cards that work on things in pendulum zones will both work on the card in this zone. Now that only goes one way. This is only a pendulum zone while the pendulum monster card is there and active as a spell card. If it later leaves, it goes back to being just a spell and trap card zone. And it's never a pendulum zone when you have just a regular spell or trap there. So you couldn't use Unwavering Bond, for instance, to negate a spell or trap that is played in the leftmost or rightmost spell and trap zone. The second big addition to the game mat are these two zones right here in the center. As you can see, these are called the Extra Monster Zones. And they're called that for two reasons. One, the fact that these are now here means that you can exceed the normal 5 monster limit. You could have 6 monsters on the field thanks to this zone. And there is a way, in fact, to have 7 monsters on the field thanks to these zones. But that's a more complicated issue, and we're not going to cover it in this video. The other reason that these are called the Extra Monster Zones is that this is where you will start summoning cards from your extra deck starting July 21st. So the way it works is this. Say I want to Xyz summon number 39 Utopia. Well, I have my 2 level 4 monsters, and I stack them up, and I put them here in the Extra Monster Zone, and put my Xyz monster on top of them. So the Extra Monster Zone is kind of like a gateway from your extra deck to the rest of the field. When you summon any kind of monster from your extra deck, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, even a Pendulum monster from your extra deck, it goes here. Even if it's being summoned by another card effect, like Bahamut Shark, for example. But you only use this zone when the monster is first being summoned from the extra deck. So if you had Stardust Dragon, for example, you would summon it to the Extra Monster Zone, tribute it off to use its effect, and then when it's summoned back to the field, it's summoned to the main monster zone. So if the monster leaves the Extra Monster Zone for whatever reason, it doesn't go back there. If it gets back to the field, it goes to a main monster zone. That applies if it goes to the graveyard and comes back, if it gets banished and comes back, or even if your opponent takes control of it and then has to return it to you. They'll take control of it, put it in their main monster zone, and when you get it back, you can put it in your main monster zone. Now, you can use cards that are in your Extra Monster Zone as material for other monsters from your extra deck. So let's take number 39 Utopia again. Number S39 Utopia the Lightning is a very popular card, and you can still summon it just fine. So you have your 39 Utopia, and you just use it as material like you normally would and summon Utopia the Lightning to the Extra Monster Zone. So who can use the Extra Monster Zone and when? At the start of the duel, these two zones aren't part of either player's field. The first person who summons from the extra deck gets to choose which one they want to use, and then as long as they have a monster in that Extra Monster Zone, it becomes part of their field. And then when the opponent wants to summon to the Extra Monster Zone, they'll go ahead and do it, and then that zone becomes part of their field, as long as they have their monster in the Extra Monster Zone. Now, normally you can only use one of these. So once you take one, the opponent gets to use the other. But if at any point there's nothing in either zone, then the next person summoned from the extra deck gets to choose again. That brings us to the new type of monster. They're called Link Monsters. Your first chance to get Link Monsters will be in Starter Deck Link Strike. This comes out on July 21st, and it features cards, the first cards, that are used in the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains animated series, which you can watch on Crunchyroll.com, and in fact you can get the newest episodes almost as soon as they finish airing in Japan. I think it's about a 1-hour delay between the episode finishing airing in Japan and when you can watch it on Crunchyroll. That's pretty cool. And pretty much all of the new cards in this deck have been used so far since the series has been on the air. So here are Link Monsters. As you can see, they look pretty different from other Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters. Tell they have no level or rank or anything like that. They've got no defense points whatsoever. And as a result of that, a Link monster must always be in attack position. It can never be in defense position, whether it's face up or face down. You can also see that Link Monster have these red arrows here. These red arrows are the Link arrows. They are very important to how Link Monsters function. And finally, where they would normally have defense points, they have a Link rating. That rating is the number of arrows that's on the card, and it's also the number of materials that you'll need to summon the card. Now these arrows do two things for you. One, they tell you where the Link Monster's effects apply, or which zones they're related to. Decode Talker, for example, gains 500 attack for each monster it points to. So for each monster that is in a zone that one of those arrows points to, Decode Talker gets 500 extra attack points. So with 3 arrows, he can make it all the way up to 3,800 attack points. He has another ability that lets you tribute a monster that he points to negate a card or effect that activates and targets a card on your side of the field. Now, you still can't tribute your opponent's monsters, even if Decode Talker is pointing to them, because you don't have an effect that says you can tribute your opponent's monsters. That still have to follow the basic game rules. Now, the other thing that the arrows on a Link monster do is extend the number of zones that you can play cards from your extra deck in. So let's say I Link summon Decode Talker. Now, normally you might think, okay, that's it. That's my one extra deck monster. But that's not the case. Now that Decode Talker's on the field, monsters from the extra deck can be summoned to the zones that his arrows point to. So I now have 2 more zones that I can summon a monster from my extra deck to. Could be anything. Doesn't have to be another Link monster. Could be an Xyz or a Synchro or a pair of Pendulum monsters. Could be anything. But I have to be careful because now I'm giving my opponent an extra zone to summon from the extra deck as well. Now he has 2 available. You can either use the other extra monster zone or the one that's being freed up by Decode Talker. How do you summon Link monsters to begin with? Well, first they start in your extra deck. They're like Synchro, Xyz, or Fusion monsters. And the way you summon them is probably closest to Synchro monsters of all of the summoning types. The way you do it is you need face-up monsters on the field as material. Let's say I've got Link Slayer here, Marauding Captain, and Ram Clouder. These 2 cards are new in the Link Strike deck. Link Slayer can be special summoned if you have no monsters. You know what Marauding Captain does. Lets you summon another monster from your hand. And here's Ram Clouder, who lets you tribute monsters to summon Cyberse type monsters from your graveyard. Cyberse is a new type, kind of like Worm or Psychic, that's being introduced as part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. So okay, I've got my monsters here. How do I Link summon? Well, first, let's take a look at the monster I want to summon. I want to play Decode Talker. Decode Talker is Link 3. That means I need 3 materials to summon him. And then up here, you'll see he needs 2+ effect monsters. That means you have to use at least 2 monsters to summon him, and the monsters that you use must be effect monsters. So I've got 3 effect monsters here. That's perfect. To Link summon, you need to have face-up monsters that meet these requirements. You say, okay, I'm going to link summon this Decode Talker, and then you send them to the graveyard, and put Decode Talker in a place that you're able to summon to. Normally it's going to be the extra monster zone. And that's it. You can do that anytime that you could, say, Synchro Summon or Xyz Summon. So it's a thing you do during your main phase when nothing else is going on. So let's take a look at another scenario. Okay, let's say I've got my Link Slayer, and then I normal summon Draconet. Draconet's another new card from Starter Deck Link Strike. When he's normal summoned, you can special summon a level 2 or lower normal monster from your hand or deck. Okay, so I'll summon Bitron. Bitron's another Cyberse type monster, just a normal monster. So let's say I want to summon Decode Talker with this. Do I meet the requirements? Well, I've got 3 monsters, or 3 materials, but do I have the 2+ effect monsters? I actually don't. While there are 2 effect monsters here, that's not what that 2+ is signifying. 2+ is the minimum number of monsters that must be used as part of the Link Summon, not the minimum number of whatever the type of monsters that Decode Talker requires. The important thing here is that all of the monsters must be effect monsters, not the 2+. So how can I use this to summon Decode Talker? Well, first, let's go ahead and check our extra deck. I've got 2 other monsters here available. I've got Link Spider, and I've got Honeybot. Link Spider takes 1 normal monster, so I could summon it by using Bitron first, or I could use 2 Cyberse monsters and summon Honeybot. So let's try it this way first. I'll Link Summon using Bitron to summon Link Spider. Link Spider needs 1 normal monster, 1 material, and it has an arrow pointing down. Okay, well it's an effect monster, so now I meet the requirements for Decode Talker. So I'll go ahead and I'll use these 3. So where can I summon Decode Talker to in this case? Obviously I can use the extra monster zone, now that it's not occupied anymore, or I could move over here and use the other extra monster zone, because it was unoccupied. But I also had Link Spider pointing down beforehand, so can I Link Summon Decode Talker here? The answer is no, you cannot. You choose where to put the Link monster, or any extra deck monster for that matter. You have to choose a legal zone after the materials are no longer on the field. So in this case, these are the only 2 choices. Now let's say that I had already used my Link Spider previously. It's gone to the graveyard. All I have left in my extra deck are Honeybot and Decode Talker, and we're back in this same situation here. Now, is there still a way I can summon Decode Talker? There is, and it's because of a special property of Link monsters that takes effect when you're using them for a further Link Summon. So first, I'll take these 2 Cyberse type monsters and use them to Link Summon Honeybot. Now, while I have 2 monsters here, and they're both effect monsters, normally you'd think I would not have the 3 materials required for Decode Talker. But there's a special property you can use when you're using a Link monster for another Link Summon. And that is, instead of counting materials just by the number of monsters, 1, 2, you can instead count a Link monster as more than 1 material. You can count it as this number, its Link rating. So instead of just counting 1, 2, it would be 1, 3. Because Honeybot has a Link rating of 2, she can count as 2 materials, even though she's just 1 monster. So I could take these 2 monsters and send them to the graveyard to Link Summon Decode Talker. So what's stopping me from just taking Decode Talker and sending it to the graveyard for another Decode Talker to fill up my graveyard or empty out my extra deck or anything like that? That's where the 2+ here comes into play. I can always have to use at least 2 monsters, no matter how many materials they're worth. So even though this could be 3 materials, it's still only 1 monster, so I can't just send it to the graveyard and keep summoning as many Decode Talkers as I can. So Starter Deck Link Strike is going to give you a Link 1 monster, a Link 2 monster, and a Link 3 monster. But you can get Link monsters, their ratings get even higher than that. So here's how the timeline's going to work. Link Strike comes out July 21st, and you can pick up the starter deck and play against other people using it as part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Day, which will happen that same weekend, July 22nd and 23rd. And then, the very next weekend, on July 29th and 30th, you'll have the sneak peek for Code of the Duelist, and that's going to be the first booster set in which there will be Link monsters. And there are a couple that have Link ratings even higher than 3, like Firewall Dragon, for example. This guy is the monster that you'll see on every pack of Code of the Duelist, and he's Link 4. Takes any monsters, it needs at least 2+ of them, so in our scenario we could use Decode Talker and, say, Bitron, and send them to the graveyard for Firewall Dragon. So you can keep upgrading your monster, kind of like you do with the Wind Witch combo, where you have your level 7, and then you turn it into a level 8. Sneak peek for Code of the Duelist is July 29th and 30th, and then the booster set comes out on August 4th. And with it will be a lot more Link monsters. So that's about it for the major changes that are going to happen. There will be some other things that generally you won't even have to worry about. Certain cards are going to have their text changed. A couple things will get smoothed out a bit to make sure that everybody's playing the same way all over the world. And I'm really excited for it because Link monsters are going to add a new level of strategy to the game where you play your cards matters. And it's pretty cool to see the unique formations of cards the players are going to come up with to make sure that their monsters and cards are working and to try to avoid the effects of their opponents. Thanks for watching.